The bucket of dirty water was the warmest thing I had touched in 3 days. I plunged the rough cloth into the gray water, my hands numb from the cold protesting with a sharp ache in my joints. Steam rose, carrying the scent of lye and cheap soap, mixing with the sickening aroma of candle wax and roasted meat that was already beginning to saturate the great hall. I was on my knees on the limestone floor, scrubbing a patch of red wine that some drunk lord had spilled the night before. Scrub, wring, scrub. That had been the rhythm of my life for 7 years, since my parents died, since Lord Ashford forged the debts and claimed me as property. "Faster, girl!" Marta, the housekeeper's shrill voice, cut the air like a whip. She strode past me, her skirts rustling, and lightly kicked my bucket, making the water ripple dangerously close to the edge. "The king arrives in less than an hour. If he sees a single spot on this floor, Lord Ashford will use your skin to polish his boots." I lowered my head, the dirty scarf covering my hair falling over my eyes. "Yes, ma'am." My voice came out scratched, little more than a whisper. I had learned to speak little. Invisibility was my shield. If I didn't speak, if I didn't look up, maybe they would forget I was there. I was the dust beneath Lord Ashford's feet. No one looks at the dust. No one cares about the dust, unless it soils their velvet shoes. I rose with difficulty, my knees cracking, and picked up the heavy bucket. My arms were too thin, the bones of my wrists prominent beneath pale skin, marked by old and new scars. Hunger was a constant companion, a hollow hole in my stomach that rumbled softly. Today, I had only eaten the crusts of bread that the pantry rats rejected. I walked toward the shadows near the kitchen, trying to merge with the stone walls. The castle was in a frenzy. Servants hurried back and forth carrying silver trays, tapestries were unrolled, torches were lit. King Theron was coming. The name was whispered through the corridors like a curse or a prayer, depending on who spoke. The Alpha King, the heartless wolf. They said he had unified the northern clans with iron and blood, that his eyes could turn a man to stone, and that he held no pity, no love, and no weakness. "I heard he's looking for a wife," whispered Daniel, one of the guards at the kitchen door, as he stole a chicken leg from a tray. He saw me, his eyes quickly darting away with that familiar guilt. Daniel knew my father. He watched me grow up. But when Ashford chained me, Daniel looked the other way. "A wife?" scoffed the cook, pounding bread dough violently. "That monster doesn't want a wife. He wants a breeder. They say he travels from clan to clan, sniffing out women like cattle at the fair, and rejects them all. None are good enough for the golden beast." I flinched, hugging the bucket to my chest. The idea of such a powerful alpha terrified me. If Lord Ashford, a cruel minor noble, was already a nightmare, what would a king who governed through fear be like? "You, Era." Ashford's butler appeared at the doorway, his face red with stress. "We are short on wine servers. Wash your hands and put on a clean apron. Now." "But sir," I tried to argue, panic rising in my throat. "The Lord forbade me to be seen in the main hall during feasts. The Lord wants the cups full," he snarled, grabbing my thin arm and pulling me into the kitchen. "Pull your scarf lower. Don't lift your eyes. Don't speak. Serve and vanish. Understood?" I swallowed hard and nodded. 10 minutes later, I was in the shadows of the great hall, holding a wine jug too heavy for my tired arms. The clean apron they gave me was too big and smelled of mildew, but it covered most of my gray rags. The double doors burst open with a crash that made the window panes vibrate. The herald banged his staff on the floor. "His Royal Majesty, King Theron of the Eternal Night Clan." The silence that fell over the hall was instantaneous and absolute. The music stopped. Laughter died. They entered. First, the elite guard. Gigantic men and women, dressed in black leather and steel, moving with the lethal precision of coordinated predators. They spread out across the hall's perimeter, hands on sword hilts, eyes sweeping the crowd for threats. And then, him. I was at the back of the hall, hidden behind a column. But even from there, his presence hit me like a wave of physical heat. King Theron was immense. He wore a tunic of black velvet embroidered with gold thread that looked like veins of fire, a cloak of black wolf fur draped over his broad shoulders, He wore no crown. He didn't need one. Authority radiated from him, heavy and suffocating. His hair was dark as midnight, falling over the forehead of a face that looked like it had been sculpted from granite by an angry god. But it was the eyes that made me hold my breath. Golden, bright, liquid, terrible. Lord Ashford, who stood at the front of the local nobles to receive him, bowed deeply, an oily smile on his face. "Majesty," Ashford said, his voice saccharine, "it is an immeasurable honor to receive the great wolf in my humble—" Theron walked right past him. The king didn't even glance at Ashford. He stopped in the middle of the red carpet, completely ignoring the pomp, the reverence, the food. He stood motionless, his head tilted slightly to the side. His nostrils flared. The entire hall held its breath. Lord Ashford turned pale, his hand hovering in the air, ignored. Theron closed his eyes for a second. An expression of pain, or perhaps ecstasy, crossed his harsh face. He inhaled deeply, as if trying to swallow all the air in the hall into his lungs. When he opened his eyes again, the gold was more intense. It burned. "Majesty?" one of his generals asked, low, approaching cautiously. "What is it?" Theron didn't answer. He started walking. He didn't go to the main table. He didn't go to the makeshift throne Ashford had prepared. He turned left, walking slowly toward the shadows, toward the columns, toward me. My heart stopped. Cold panic flooded my veins. He saw me, I thought. He saw the filth. He saw the slave where there should be no slaves. Lord Ashford was going to kill me. I tried to back away, shrinking further against the cold stone, trying to become part of the architecture. I hugged the wine jug to my chest like a useless shield. But Theron kept coming. The nobles made way for him, confused and scared. He moved like a predator tracking blood, focused, relentless. With every step he took, his scent reached me. Amber, cedar, rain on the forest, and something else. Something primitive and powerful that made my inner wolf, dormant and hungry for years, whimper inside my soul. He stopped 10 feet from me. I was trembling so hard that the wine in the jug swayed, threatening to spill. Theron looked at the column, at the shadows, and then lowered his eyes. To me. He saw the ragged shoes tied with string. He saw the hem of the frayed dress. He saw the red hands, cracked by cold and labor, holding the polished silver. He took another step. His boots stopped inches from my feet. His cloak brushed against my arm, soft and warm. "Lift your head," he commanded. His voice was not the thunder I expected. It was hoarse, broken, as if he had run a marathon to get here. I couldn't move. Fear paralyzed me. If I looked a royal alpha in the eyes, it would be a challenge. It would be my death. "Please," he whispered. And the word, coming from that man, was more shocking than a scream. Slowly, painfully, I lifted my chin. My blue eyes, pale and tired, met the molten gold of his. The world around us vanished. The sound of conversations, the smell of food, the coldness of the floor, it all disappeared. Only he remained, and the heavy anchor that seemed to have been cast from his chest to mine, binding us together with a gravitational force. Theron released the breath he seemed to have been holding for a decade. "It's you," he murmured, disbelief tinging his voice. He raised his hand, his large gloved fingers trembling slightly, and touched the air near my face, as if afraid I were a mirage that would vanish at his touch. "Honeysuckle and snow, I have searched for you in every corner of this damn continent." He stepped forward, invading my space, enveloping me with his warmth and his scent. I instinctively backed away, hunching my shoulders, awaiting the blow. It was habit. When a large man approaches, pain follows. The movement did not go unnoticed. Theron's eyes narrowed. The gold darkened. His focus dropped to my bruised hands, to the purple bruise showing beneath the sleeve of my dress, a mark from Marta's grip yesterday. The atmosphere in the hall changed violently. The adoration on the king's face disappeared, replaced by a fury so cold and absolute that the hall's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He turned slowly to the silent hall. His gaze swept the crowd and landed on Lord Ashford, who was now sweating cold. When Theron spoke, his voice was the sound of tectonic plates cracking. "Who?" he began, and the snarl underlying the word made the crystal glasses on the tables vibrate. "Who dared put rags on my queen?" The wine jug slipped from my numb hands. It shattered on the stone floor. The sound of glass breaking and the red wine spreading like blood at the king's feet was the only sound in the world. I waited for the scream. I waited for the punishment. But Theron didn't look at the wine. He turned back to me, ignoring the stain on his boots, and fell to his knees. There, amid the spilled wine and the shards of glass, the Wolf King knelt before the slave. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice full of desperate panic, his hands hovering over mine, not daring to touch. I looked at him, paralyzed, unable to comprehend. Queen? Me? Majesty. Lord Ashford tried to intervene, stepping forward, his voice trembling. "That is only Era. She is an orphan, a weak-minded servant. She must have stolen something to attract your attention. I will have her whipped immediately." Theron did not stand up. He only turned his head toward Ashford. The snarl that came from his throat this time was not human. It was the beast. "If you take one more step toward her," Theron said, with terrifying calm, "I will rip out your spine and use it as a leash for my dog." He turned back to me. His golden eyes, now filled with unshed tears, sought mine. "Ara." He tested the name on his tongue, as if it were a sacred sweetness. "My name is Theron, and I swear by my life and my blood, no one will ever hurt you again." He extended his hand, palm up. An invitation, not a command. I looked at his hand. It was large, strong, capable of crushing stone, but it lay there, open, waiting, trembling. I looked at Ashford, livid with terror. I looked at Daniel, aghast in the doorway. And then I looked at my own hand, red, dirty, calloused. With my heart beating so hard it hurt, I placed my hand in his. His warmth enveloped my cold fingers, and for the first time in 7 years I didn't feel fear. I felt like I had come home. The contact of his skin with mine was like touching a live wire. A current of heat shot up my arm, thawing the blood that seemed to have been stone in my veins for years. Theron closed his fingers around my hand, with a gentle possessiveness, as if holding a wounded bird that might break if he squeezed too hard, or fly away if he let go. He stood up slowly, pulling me with him. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. He was a mountain, yes, but I was connected to the base of that mountain. The silence in the hall was thick, broken only by Lord Ashford's heavy breathing. "Majesty," Ashford tried again, sweat gleaming on his bald forehead. "There must be a misunderstanding. She is property of House Ashford, a blood debt from her father." Theron did not release my hand. He turned to Ashford with a predatory slowness. The fury radiating from him was almost visible, a dark aura that made the air vibrate. "Property?" Theron repeated the word, savoring it with disgust. "You dare call my mate property?" He stepped forward, pulling me behind his body, placing himself as a living shield between me and the man who had terrified me since I was 12. "Blood debt?" Theron continued, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Very well. Let us speak of blood." With a movement too fast for the eyes to follow, Theron's free hand shot out. He grabbed Ashford by his silk collar and lifted him off the ground. The fat lord flailed, his feet kicking uselessly in the air, his face turning purple. Ashford's guards made to draw their swords, but Theron's elite guard reacted instantly. The metallic sound of 12 swords being unsheathed at once echoed through the hall. "Don't even think about it," snarled one of Theron's generals, a woman with scars on her face and eyes of ice. Theron pulled Ashford close, until their noses nearly touched. "You starved her," he accused, sniffing the air. "I smell the malnutrition on her. I smell the fear you instilled in her bones. I smell the slave labor on her hands." He tightened his grip. Ashford gasped. "For every day she went hungry, you will lose a pound of flesh," Theron promised. "For every tear she shed, you will bleed a pint." "Theron," I whispered. The word escaped before I could think. I had never called anyone in authority by their first name. The effect was immediate. Theron stopped. The tension in his shoulders relaxed slightly. He turned his head to look at me, and the gold in his eyes softened. "You want me to spare him, Aura?" he asked, his voice suddenly gentle. I looked at Ashford. He stared at me with panic, silently pleading. The man who beat me when I broke a plate. The man who let Daniel watch me cry and laughed. I felt no pity, but I also felt no desire to see blood. I just wanted to leave. I wanted the cold to stop. "I just want to get out of here," I murmured, shrinking within the dirty apron. Theron released Ashford, letting him drop to the floor like a sack of garbage. The Lord coughed, massaging his neck. "Consider yourself a dead man walking, Ashford," Theron said without looking at him. "My judges will arrive tomorrow, and they will not have the mercy you do." Theron turned to me. He looked at the shards of glass and the wine on the floor where I was barefoot. My ragged shoes didn't count as protection. "Don't take another step," he said. Before I could ask why, he bent down and slid one arm beneath my knees and the other across my back. With a soft grunt, he lifted me into the air. "What? Majesty, no!" I protested, panicking. "I am dirty. The wine. Your velvet. To hell with the velvet," he said vehemently. "You are too light, Aura. Too light." He pressed me against his chest. I could hear his heart beating, a strong, steady rhythm, much faster than his calm expression would suggest. He was agitated. He started walking toward the exit, carrying me as if I were made of glass. We passed the nobles' tables. I saw Lady Morgana, the daughter of a neighboring duke, staring at me with her mouth open and an expression of shock and envy. I saw the servants, my former colleagues, looking with reverence and fear. Daniel was at the door. As we passed him, Theron stopped. "You are the kitchen guard?" Theron asked, without looking at Daniel, but his voice was cold. Yes, Majesty," Daniel stammered, lowering his head. "You saw her suffer?" Theron asked. "You watched her starve and did nothing?" Daniel didn't answer. The silence was the confession. "Remember this moment," Theron said. "The moment the queen walked past you, and you weren't worthy even to look at her shadow." He walked out into the cold night. The freezing air hit my face, but not my body. Theron's warmth was a furnace. A black carriage, pulled by 4 immense stallions, waited in the courtyard. The coachman opened the door immediately. The interior was lined with soft white furs. It looked like a cloud. Theron placed me inside with a reverent care, seating me on the furs. "Stay here," he said, his voice husky. "I'll be right back." "Where are you going?" I asked, instinctively grabbing the sleeve of his tunic. The fear that he would leave and abandon me, that this was all a cruel dream, hit me. He looked at my hand holding his sleeve. A small, almost painful smile curved his lips. He covered my hand with his. "I will never leave you, Era. Never. I'm just going to get something to cover you." He moved away for a second and returned with a heavy, thick wool blanket. He entered the carriage, sitting on the seat opposite mine, but his knees touched mine. The carriage was spacious, but he seemed to fill all the space. He unfolded the blanket and placed it over me, tucking the edges around me as if wrapping a precious gift. "Better?" he asked, his golden eyes sweeping my face, looking for any sign of discomfort. "It's warm," I whispered, running my hand over the soft texture of the fur on the seat. I don't remember the last time I felt warm without being near an oven. Theron's jaw clenched. He looked away toward the dark window, and I saw a muscle jump in his cheek. He was fighting the rage again. The carriage began to move. The rocking was gentle, very different from the hay carts where I used to hide and sleep. "Why me?" I asked, doubt corroding the wonder of the moment. "I am broken, Theron. I have no clan. I have no dowry. My wolf hasn't spoken to me for years." He looked back at me. The intensity of his gaze made my breath hitch. "Broken," he repeated, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Aura, you survived 7 years in hell without becoming a demon. You maintained your dignity when they tried to take everything from you." He reached out, and with the tip of his finger, lightly touched a white scar on my chin. "My wolf howled for you before I even knew your name. I dreamed of your scent, honeysuckle, the promise of spring in the middle of winter." He took my hand again. turning the palm upward. He traced the lines of the rough calluses with his thumb. "These hands have worked harder than any warrior in my army," he said, his voice low and fervent. "And starting today, the only thing they will have to hold is me." I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from an emotion so great that my chest ached. Relief, gratitude, and something else terrifying. Hope. "I don't know how to be a queen," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I only know how to clean floors." Theron smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes, lighting the gold with a genuine warmth. "Then you will teach me how to wipe the floor with my enemies," he joked, trying to ease the tension. "And I will teach you the rest, starting with a very important thing." He leaned back and tapped on the carriage ceiling. "Food," he shouted to the coachman. "Stop at the next inn and bring everything they have." He looked at me, and his stomach rumbled, loud and clear. I laughed. It was a rusty sound, strange to my own ears, but it came out. Theron looked at me as if I had just sung the most beautiful opera in the world. "That sound," he said, marveling. "I want to hear that sound every day for the rest of my life." I rested my head against the fur seat, exhaustion finally catching up to me. The rocking of the carriage, the warmth, the smell of cedar from him. "Do you swear?" I asked, my eyes heavy. "That I will never be cold again?" Theron moved. I felt him sit next to me on the bench. He put an arm around my shoulders, pulling me to his chest. "I swear, Ara," he whispered against my dirty hair, kissing the top of my head. "As long as I have breath, the cold will never touch you again." I closed my eyes and, for the first time in 7 years, fell asleep without fear of waking up. I woke up to the sound of water being poured. For a moment, panic gripped me. I thought I was late to fill the laundry tubs. I tried to jump out of bed, but my body sank into something too soft, and silk sheets slid over my skin. I opened my eyes. The ceiling was not damp stone with spider webs. It was cream canvas, stretched over polished wooden beams. We were in a campaign tent, but it looked like a mobile palace. "She's awake," a feminine voice whispered urgently. I turned my head. 3 women stood at the foot of the bed. They wore simple dresses, but of good fabric and immaculate aprons. There was no scorn in their eyes, only curiosity and respect. "The king ordered us to prepare the bath, my lady," the oldest one said, curtsying. "The water is hot, my lady." I looked at my hands, still dirty, still scarred. Where is he?" I asked, my voice hoarse with sleep. "The king is inspecting the perimeter, my lady," the woman replied. "He didn't leave your side all night. He only left when he was sure you were in a deep sleep." I got up, feeling awkward in the fine linen nightgown that someone must have put on me while I slept. The bath was an experience that bordered on the religious. The tub was copper, large enough for 3 people. The water smelled of lavender and almond oil. When I stepped in, the water turned gray almost instantly. Shame burned me. "I'm sorry," I murmured, trying to cover my thin body with my arms. It's been a long time." The servants didn't laugh. The youngest, a girl with kind eyes, picked up a soft sponge. "Don't apologize, lady," she said gently, beginning to scrub my back. "Let us wash the past away." That's what they did. They scrubbed the dirt, cut my broken nails, washed my hair 3 times until the foam came out white as snow. When I finally got out of the water, I felt light, as if I had lost 20 pounds of dust and sadness. They dressed me, not in rags. A dress of deep blue velvet, the color of the night sky, with long sleeves that hid my thin arms, and a modest neckline that revealed only the curve of my neck. When I looked in the polished silver mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. The blue eyes seemed larger, brighter. My platinum blonde hair, now clean and brushed, fell in shining waves to my waist. I looked like a person. The tent door opened. Theron walked in. He still wore his travel clothes, but he seemed to have washed in the river. His hair was damp. He stopped. His golden eyes swept over my body from head to toe, devouring the sight. "Leave us," he ordered the servants, without taking his eyes off me. They bowed quickly and disappeared. We were alone. The air grew heavy, charged with that electricity that always surged when he was near. "You look," he started, and his voice failed. He cleared his throat. "Blue suits you. It reminds me of your eyes. Thank you," I replied, shyly, smoothing the skirt. "Theron, I've never had a dress like this." He approached. He took my hand and raised it to his lips, kissing the clean, fragrant palm. "You will have 1,000 dresses, Ara. One for every star in the sky." He led me to a small table set in the corner of the tent. There was roasted chicken, fresh bread, fruit, cheese, wine. The smell made my stomach roar again. We sat down. He served my plate. He cut the meat into small pieces, as if I were a child or an invalid. "Eat," he encouraged. "Slowly. Your stomach isn't used to it." I ate. Every bite was an explosion of flavor that made me want to cry. Theron didn't eat. He just watched me, drinking wine, with an expression of profound satisfaction with every piece I swallowed. "Tell me," he asked, when I pushed the plate away, satiated for the first time in years. "How did it happen? How did the daughter of a respectable beta end up in Ashford's hands?" I took a deep breath. The story was an old wound, but with him there, it felt safe to touch it. "My parents died in the winter plague," I began, looking at the candle flame on the table. "Ashford showed up the day after the funeral. He had papers. He claimed my father owed a fortune in taxes and loans. I was 12 years old. I couldn't read the contracts. I felt the tent temperature drop. Theron was squeezing his wine glass so hard the metal groaned. He said I would have to work to pay off the debt. I thought it would be for a few months, but the debt never went down. He charged for my food, my clothes, the air I breathed. He turned debt into chains." Theron dropped the crumpled glass onto the table. "Debt slavery has been illegal in my kingdom for 20 years, he said, his voice cold as dry ice. "Ashford knew it. He gambled that no one would care about an orphan." "No one cared," I confirmed, sadly. "Until you." Theron reached across the table and held my face. "I am sorry, Ara. I am sorry I didn't arrive sooner. But I promise you, Ashford will wish he had died in the plague." 2 days later, we arrived at the capital. The city of wolves was immense, built on the slopes of a mountain, with the royal palace at the summit, gleaming like a crown of white stone. I was terrified. Theron felt my fear through the newly formed bond, still incomplete but present. He held my hand in the carriage the entire time. When we entered the palace courtyard, the entire court was there to receive the king. Theron dismounted first. He turned and offered his hand to me. I took a deep breath. "Courage," I told myself. "You are dust turned diamond. Believe it." I placed my hand in his and stepped down. A murmur ran through the crowd. They expected a warrior, a foreign princess, or perhaps no one. They saw a pale, thin girl, with frightened eyes, wearing the king's colors. "Who is she?" I heard the whispers. "She looks like a broken doll. Where did he find her?" Theron looped his arm around my waist, pulling me against his solid body. He looked at the court with that challenging gaze that silenced armies. "People of the city of wolves," he announced, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "I present to you Ara, my mate, your future queen." The silence was stunning. And then, a laugh. Lady Morgana, the same one who was at Ashford's feast, had traveled fast. She stood in the front row, dressed in red silk, beautiful and venomous. "Majesty," she said with a smile too sweet. "Surely this is a joke. A servant on the silver throne? Royal lineage demands pure blood, strength, power. This girl can barely stand up against the wind." Theron snarled, literally. But before he could strike, I felt something strange, a pang of warmth in my chest. It didn't come from him. It came from me. I looked at Morgana. "Strength is not measured only by the size of the claws, Lady Morgana." My voice came out clear, surprising myself and everyone else. "Sometimes, strength is just the ability to bear the weight of the world without breaking. And I have carried weights that would make you crumble in a day." Morgana blinked, her smile faltering. Theron looked at me, surprised and proud. "Well said," he murmured in my ear. But I saw the look in the eyes of the other nobles. They were not convinced. They saw weakness. They saw prey. They didn't know what Theron knew. They didn't know that the wolf inside me was waking up. And she was not a servant. She was white. She was ancient. And she was tired of being nice. As we walked into the palace, I felt the hateful stares on my back. The war had not ended with Ashford. It was just beginning here, in this silken nest of vipers. But this time, I was not alone. I squeezed Theron's hand. He squeezed back. "They will test you," he warned, low. "Let them come," I replied, feeling the first tremor of real power in my veins. I survived real monsters. These are just yapping dogs. The days at court dragged like cold molasses. Theron tried to protect me, keeping me in his private chambers, surrounded by trusted guards. But he had a kingdom to govern. There were council meetings, border disputes, trials, and whenever he left, loneliness and whispers seeped through the cracks in the oak doors. I felt like an imposter in fine silks. The palace servants were polite, but distant. I saw the judgment in their eyes, the slave who seduced the king. On the third afternoon, I received an invitation, a rose-scented parchment delivered by a page. To Lady Ara, as future queen, it is tradition that you acquaint yourself with the winter gardens. I would like to offer a truce and show you the beauties our kingdom cultivates. Perhaps we can start anew. Lady Morgana. I knew it was dangerous. Theron had warned me about her, but I couldn't live hidden forever. If I wanted to be queen, I had to face the court, and refusing an invitation of peace would be seen as weakness or arrogance. "I will go," I told the head guard, a burly man named Silas. "The king will not like it, lady," Silas cautioned, frowning. "The king is busy with the generals. I will take you and 2 men. What can happen in the palace gardens?" Silas sighed, but nodded. The winter gardens were stunning. Labyrinths of high hedges, statues of magical ice that never melted, white flowers blooming in the snow. Morgana waited for me near the Fountain of Tears. She smiled when she saw me, a smile that didn't reach her cold, predatory eyes. "Era, how brave of you to come," she said, smoothing her kid-leather gloves. "You offered a truce," I replied, keeping my distance. Silas and the guards were 10 steps away, alert. "I did," she agreed, walking slowly around the fountain. "You know, Theron is a man of voracious appetites. He is charmed by novelties. The Cinderella he rescued from the mud is a beautiful story, but stories end. And when he tires of playing savior, what will be left of you?" "He is not playing," I said, firmly, although doubt was a seed she watered with pleasure. "We are mates." Morgana laughed. "Mates? Has he marked you?" "No." "Has he bitten you?" "No. You are just a possibility, and possibilities can be eliminated." She snapped her fingers. The ground beneath Silas's and the guard's feet exploded. It wasn't a bomb. It was magic. Hidden runes in the snow glowed red, and the ground gave way, swallowing my protectors in a deep pit of earth and ice. I heard their screams, followed by a muffled thud below. "Silas!" I screamed, running toward the hole. An invisible wall of magic threw me back. I fell onto the hard snow, the air knocked from my lungs. I looked up. Morgana was on the other side of the barrier, smiling. "Don't worry, they will survive. But you," she whistled. A sharp, cutting sound. From behind the hedges of the maze, a sound arose that chilled my blood. Growls. 3 wild dogs. Not wolves. Warhounds, bred to kill bears. Huge, with iron collars and drool dripping from jaws full of yellow teeth. They didn't have the intelligence of shifters. They were just hungry beasts. "Theron forbade duels," Morgana said, her voice muffled by the barrier. "But accidents happen. The poor servant got lost in the gardens and entered the hunting kennel. A tragedy." She turned and left, disappearing among the hedges. I was left alone with the monsters. The dogs advanced. The leader, a black animal with scars on its muzzle, leaped. I instinctively rolled to the side. Jaws snapped where my neck had been a second earlier. The smell of rotten meat from his breath hit me. I got up, running toward the fountain. The water was frozen. There were no weapons. There was no escape. The magic barrier surrounded the clearing. "Help!" I screamed, knowing it was useless. The second dog charged, biting the hem of my dress. The fabric tore. I fell again. I felt teeth graze my calf. Hot pain. Blood. The smell of my blood drove the beasts mad. They surrounded me, snarling, ready to tear me apart. I closed my eyes, waiting for death. Again. Always the victim. Always the weak one. No. The word exploded in my mind. It was not my thought. It came from a deeper place. It came from my blood. "It came from the wolf," Theron said he heard. "Get up," the inner voice commanded. It was not a sweet voice. It was an ancient, furious, and real voice. "You are a lunar omega. You are not food. You are the moon." I opened my eyes. Time seemed to slow down. The lead dog leaped toward my throat. I didn't scream. I didn't flinch. I unleashed my wolf. There was no full physical transformation. There was no time. But my aura exploded out of my body like a silver shockwave. My eyes, I knew, were no longer blue. They were liquid silver. I raised my hand. "Stop!" My voice was not human. It carried the weight of 1,000 ancestors. The Omega command. The lead dog, mid-air, was struck by the force of my voice. It whimpered, its aggression crushed by a primal instinct of submission. It fell to the ground, skidding on the snow, and huddled, hiding its muzzle between its paws. The other 2 dogs stopped, confused, trembling. The aura I emanated was not one of physical threat. It was one of absolute spiritual authority. I smelled like the alpha of alphas, the mother of all. I stood there, breathing hard, blood dripping from my leg, but feeling a vibrant power run beneath my skin. The dogs, formerly murderous monsters, now crawled belly down on the ground, whimpering for forgiveness. It was at that moment that the magic barrier shattered with a sound of breaking glass. Theron burst into the clearing. He was in his hybrid form, claws, golden eyes, exposed fangs, a killing machine fueled by pure panic. He saw the dogs. He roared, ready to dismember them. "No!" I screamed. Theron stopped, his claws inches from the lead dog. He looked at me. He saw the silver light in my eyes. He saw the dogs submissive at my feet. He saw the blood on my leg. His hybrid form receded. He was a man again, but the shock on his face was complete. "Ara?" he whispered. "They are not guilty," I said, my voice returning to normal, my legs beginning to shake as the adrenaline wore off. They were used, just like I was. Theron looked at the dogs, then at me. He understood. He understood that I didn't need to be saved from the monsters. I had tamed the monsters. He ran to me the moment my knees gave way. "You are hurt," he said, examining my leg with trembling hands. His anger was there, boiling, but the pride shone brighter. "Morgana," I whispered, leaning my head against his chest. "She set this up." Theron's face hardened into granite. "She will wish she had been devoured by those dogs," he promised. He picked me up in his arms. This time I didn't feel like a porcelain doll. I felt like a queen wounded in battle. "We're going home," he said. "And then there will be justice." As he carried me out of the gardens, I looked back. The dogs were still lying in the snow, looking up at me with reverence. I was no longer the slave. I had found my voice, and it was louder than the bark of any dog. Theron's justice was swift. He burst into the council hall with the fury of a hurricane, still carrying me in his arms, my ripped and blood-stained dress being proof of the crime. He placed me gently in his own chair at the head of the table, a gesture that made the counselors gasp. "Lady Morgana," Theron said, his voice low and terrible. "Bring her in." 2 elite guards entered, dragging the noblewoman. She no longer had the smug smile. She was pale, disheveled, but still tried to maintain a facade of outraged dignity. "This is an outrage!" she shouted. "I am the daughter of the Duke of Valoria. You cannot treat me like a common criminal." "You attempted to murder my mate," Theron replied, walking up to her. "That doesn't make you a common criminal. It makes you a traitor to the throne. The penalty is death." A murmur of shock swept through the room. "Majesty, A tall, robust man stood up. Lord Vane, an old ally of Morgana's family. You cannot execute a noble without trial because of the word of a slave. Careful, Vane, Theron warned, his eyes flashing. I challenge, Vane shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I challenge the legitimacy of this union. The ancient code states that the king cannot unite with someone of inferior caste if it threatens the purity of the lineage. This girl is weak. She is a broken Omega. She pollutes the throne. I invoke the right of combat. The hall went absolutely silent. The right of combat. An archaic law that allowed an Alpha to challenge the king's decisions through a duel to the death. Theron smiled. It was a bloody smile. You want to fight, Vane? For her? I want to fight for the honor of the kingdom, Vane retorted, drawing his sword. If I win, the girl is exiled and Morgana is freed. If you win, well, the king does as he wishes. I accept, Theron said immediately. No. I tried to stand, but the pain in my leg made me fall back into the chair. Theron, no. He's setting something up. Theron turned to me, held my face, and kissed me quick and hard. Stay here, Era. This ends today. The duel happened right there, in the center of the hall. The tables were pushed back. Vane was large, an experienced warrior, but Theron was the Wolf King. The fight was brutal. The sound of steel against steel echoed off the stone walls. Theron fought with controlled ferocity, parrying Vane's blows with almost insulting ease. He was playing with his prey. You defend garbage, Vane grunted, lunging with a low blow. Theron dodged, spun, and sliced Vane's arm. Blood splattered onto the floor. I defend the only pure thing in this room, Theron retorted. Vane backed away, panting. He exchanged a quick glance with Morgana, who was huddled in the corner. She nodded imperceptibly. Vane charged in a suicidal attack. Theron saw the opening. He plunged his sword into Vane's chest. The Lord gasped, his eyes wide. Theron pulled the sword out. Vane fell to his knees. It's over, Theron said, turning his back on his fallen opponent to come to me. Theron, look out! I screamed. Vane, with his last breath, pulled a hidden dagger from his boot. It wasn't ordinary steel. The blade shone with a sickening green. He lunged forward and plunged the dagger into Theron's thigh, just above the knee guard. Theron roared, spinning and decapitating Vane with a single swing of his sword. The traitor's head rolled across the floor. But the damage was done. Theron staggered. He looked at his leg. The blood oozing from the wound was black and smoking. Manticore venom, one of the counselors whispered in horror. There is no cure. Theron collapsed. Theron! I screamed, ignoring the pain in my own leg and rushing to him. I fell to my knees beside him. His face was already turning gray. Cold sweat covered his forehead. The venom was fast. Ara, he whispered, his voice failing. Run! They'll kill you. Shut up, I ordered, tears streaming down my face. No one is going to die today. The royal healers ran into the hall, but seeing the black blood, they backed away, shaking their heads. Majesty, the venom is already in the blood, the head healer said sadly. It's too late. I looked at Theron, the man who pulled me out of hell, the man who gave me warmth. He was dying. For me? No. I refused to accept it. I felt that wave of silver power again, the same one that tamed the dogs. But now it wasn't a command. It was healing. My wolf howled inside me. You are the light, she said. The light purifies. I placed both my hands on the horrific wound on his leg. What is she doing? Morgana scoffed, hysterical. Going to soil your hands with blood again, slave? I closed my eyes and ignored the world. I focused on the bond between us, on that golden thread that united us. Pull, my wolf instructed. I didn't suck with my mouth, as in the ancient tales. I sucked with my soul, visualized the venom, the greasy green darkness invading the gold of his blood. I grasped that darkness with my silver light. I felt excruciating pain, as if I had placed my hands in boiling acid. I screamed, but I didn't let go. A white, blinding light began to emanate from my hands. The entire hall gasped. By the old gods, someone whispered. She is a lunar omega. The black blood began to flow out of the wound, turning into gray smoke as soon as it touched the light from my hands. I was draining his death. I felt my vital energy being sucked away. My vision darkened at the edges. Was I trading my life for his? So be it. Theron gasped, air returning to his lungs. Color began to return to his face. When the last drop of venom evaporated, I collapsed onto his chest, exhausted, trembling uncontrollably. The hall was in absolute silence. Theron opened his eyes. The gold was back, bright and alive. He looked at me, then at the wound, which was now only a pink scar. He sat up, holding me against him. "You," he murmured, disbelieving. "You saved me." I lifted my head, weak but triumphant. I looked at the court, at the counselors who called me weak, at Morgana, who now looked terrified. "Does anyone else want to challenge my legitimacy?" I asked. My voice was a whisper, but in the silence of the hall, it sounded like thunder. No one answered. One by one, the lords and ladies began to kneel. Not for Theron. For me. They were not bowing to the king's wife. They were bowing to the king's savior. To the lunar omega. Theron kissed my forehead, and I felt a tear of his fall on my cheek. "My queen," he said, loud and clear. "My life is yours." I closed my eyes, allowing myself, finally, to rest in the arms of my Alpha. The battle was over, and the slave had died in the arena. The morning air was crisp and carried the scent of new flowers when the cathedral doors opened. The sun hit the stained glass windows, painting the stone floor with mosaics of light. I stood at the altar, beside Theron. I wasn't wearing blue velvet this time. My dress was made of iridescent white silk, embroidered with silver threads that looked like liquid moonlight. On my head, there was no dirty scarf, but a delicate tiara of diamonds and moonstone, heavy with 1,000 years of history, yet light upon my unbound hair. Theron held my hands. He was magnificent in his black and gold ceremonial attire, but his eyes only had space for me. The bond between us vibrated, strong and unbreakable, a silent song of belonging. The cathedral was packed. Nobles, warriors, representatives from all clans, and in the back, near the doors, I saw faces I knew from another life. Lord Ashford wasn't there. He was already on his way to the lands of exile, his lands confiscated and distributed to the servants he had abused. Lady Morgana had met the same fate, but Daniel was there. He stood in the last row, wearing his guard uniform, his head bowed, his hat in his hands. He didn't dare look at me. I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't pain, it was closure. The high priest raised his hands. "Today, before the moon and the blood, we unite the Alpha King Theron and the Omega Queen Ara, not just in marriage, but in soul." Theron turned to me. He picked up the largest crown, the Queen Consort's, which rested on a velvet cushion. "I do not crown you because I need a queen," he said, his voice low and intimate, ignoring the crowd. "I crown you because this kingdom needs your light, because I need your light." He placed the crown on my head. Its weight settled, familiar and right. "I accept this crown," I replied, my voice steady, echoing through the silent cathedral, not as an adornment, but as a promise, that the dust will never again be ignored, that strength will be used to protect, not to oppress. Theron smiled, that rare, genuine smile he reserved just for me. He leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a ceremonial kiss. It was a kiss of devotion. The crowd erupted in applause. The howls of celebration from the guards outside joined the chorus. Later, we were alone in the palace's private gardens, away from the party noise. We sat on a marble bench, watching the full moon rise in the sky. Theron took my hand. He traced the old scar on my thumb with his finger, then brought it to his lips and kissed the spot, as he did every night. "Do you still feel afraid?" he asked softly. I looked at the moon, then at him. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Sometimes I wake up thinking the smell of lavender is a dream, and that I'll wake up to the smell of lie." Theron squeezed my hand. "I will be there to remind you that it's real. Every morning." I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder. I spent years cleaning up other people's filth, I murmured, thinking of the girl who scrubbed the floor, thinking I was garbage because I was covered in dust. But you showed me that the diamond only shines when the mud is removed. I looked at the ring on my finger, gleaming under the moonlight. I am not the slave who became queen, Theron. I think I was always a queen who was just surviving slavery until her king found her. Theron kissed the top of my head. You found me too, Ara. I was a king on a throne of ice. You brought me summer. We stayed there in silence, just feeling each other's warmth and the double beat of our hearts. Finally in sync. The slave was gone. The queen was home. And for the first time in my entire life, I knew exactly who I was. I was Ara. I was light. And I was loved. Thank you for being here and for joining me for another story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you want, leave your comment. I love reading what you feel and think after each episode. Thank you for the love, and see you in the next story.